Jack Grayson was not a hero. He was not a soldier, not a rich man, and not even very lucky. He was just a human scavenge, traveling from junk world to junk world. Looking for broken machines and metal parts, all he wanted was a few pieces of good scrap to fix his old cargo ship, the Rust Sparrow. His fuel tank was half empty, and his credits were almost gone if he didn't find something valuable today. He wouldn't make it off this planet. The alien bazaar on Vorkin 7 was noisy and crowded. Creatures from all over the galaxy haggled and shouted, some selling glowing crystals, others selling old tech. Jack ignored the shiny stuff. He knew better. The best deals were found at the end of the market in the quiet, dusty auction hall where people dump their junk in bulk. He walked into the hall and looked around. There weren't many buyers today. A few traders stood near the walls, eyes dull and bored. The auctioneer, a tall creature with green skin and 4 arms, stood behind a rusty podium. The current item, a pile of scrap parts, didn't interest Jack. But the last item on the list did catch his attention. One final item. The auctioneer said with a strange smile, "Organic salvage, unidentified tech, unknown origin." The words made no sense, but Jack leaned forward, curious. The item was wheeled in on a low platform, covered by a dirty metal sheet. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. The auctioneer looked around the room, then whispered in a low voice, "Starting bid 10 credits." Jack blinked. 10 credits. That was almost free, he thought. Maybe it was broken tech. Or some failed biomachine, something he could strip for wires, or sell to a black market mechanic. He raised his hand just to see what it was. No one else bid. The auctioneer hit the bell. Sold to the human as Jack stepped forward. The sheet was pulled away. His breath caught in his throat. It wasn't a machine. It was a girl. She was curled up on the metal platform like a trapped animal. Her arms were thin, her skin pale under the dust. Strange wires were wrapped around. Her legs and neck and her back had small metal plates fused into the skin. Her eyes opened, slowly glowing, soft, terrified. Jack froze. This wasn't scrap. This was someone. The room was quiet now. No one said anything. No one cared. Jack looked at the auctioneer, his voice sharp. "What is this?" The auctioneer shrugged. "Malfunctioning construct, part organic, part tech. Good for parts if you know how to cut." "She's alive," Jack said, louder this time. The others in the room looked away, uninterested. To them, she was broken. Worthless, not even a problem worth noticing. The girl looked at Jack, lips trembling. Then she whispered one word, barely audible through cracked lips. "Free." Jack's heart twisted. He didn't know who she was, or how she ended up like this, but she was not a machine. Not to him. He lifted her gently. Her body light like paper. She didn't resist, but a soft whimper escaped her mouth. Her arms wrapped weakly around his neck, and her head rested on his shoulder like a child too tired to cry anymore. Jack turned without saying another word and walked out of the auction hall. The dusty streets outside felt colder now. People stared as he passed a human carrying what looked like a broken alien toy. But Jack didn't stop, didn't explain. He made his way back to the Rust Sparrow, placed her on the only clean bed left in the ship, and sat down beside her. She slept, or maybe passed out. Jack didn't know how to help her. He wasn't a doctor, and he'd never seen tech like this before. But one thing was clear to him now. He had come here looking for scrap metal, for spare parts to fix his broken ship. Instead, he got something. No machine could give him a living, breathing mystery with a face that haunted him the moment he looked into her eyes. Jack stared at her quiet form, heart still racing. He whispered to himself, "What did I just bring on board?" And deep down, he already knew this was not just scrap. This was the start of something that would change his life forever. Asterisk, the small medical scanner in Jack's ship blinked with red lights. It beeped in slow rhythm as it scanned the strange alien girl lying on his bunk. Jack sat beside her, staring at the screen, trying to understand the mix of data flashing across it, heart rate weak but steady, blood pressure barely holding. But one thing was clear, she was not a robot, not even part machine anymore. She was fully alive. He took a deep breath and looked at her again. She hadn't moved since he carried her from the auction. Her skin was pale, almost colorless, stretched over her thin frame like she hadn't eaten in days. The wires around her arms and legs were tight, leaving red marks. Her back still had metal pieces fused to her flesh-hold tech melted into living skin. Jack didn't understand how. Anyone could do this to a person, to treat her like scrap. She whimpered in her sleep. Body shaking gently, Jack leaned closer, whispering softly, "It's okay. You're safe now." But she didn't wake. He grabbed his toolkit and sat beside her. Hands trembling, slowly, carefully, he started cutting the wires, not all at once, just the ones he could safely remove. He didn't want to hurt her. Each wire hissed as it snapped. A reminder of where she came from. After half an hour, he had freed her legs and arms. Her skin underneath was bruised and burned. He grabbed a clean cloth and gently cleaned the dust from her face. Underneath the grime, she had soft features, delicate. Like someone never meant for this harsh life, a small scar ran across her cheek, like someone had tried to silence her once. Suddenly, her eyes opened, Jack froze, her gaze locked onto his. Wide and wild, she sat up fast, breathing hard, hands shaking like she expected pain. He held up his hands quickly. "Wait, no one's going to hurt you." She stared at him, confused. Lips moving, but no words coming out. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for something familiar, but finding only metal walls. Where am I?" she whispered, her voice rough and dry. "You're on my ship," Jack said, gently. "You were at the auction. I brought you out of there." She blinked, trying to remember. Then she looked down at herself, saw the wires now cut loose on the bed. Her hands went to her neck, no collar. She touched her chest, feeling her heartbeat as if checking if she was real. Her eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was dead," she said in a whisper. "I wanted to be." Jack sat down slowly, keeping his voice calm. "You're not dead," he said. "You're free now, at least from that place." She looked at him with doubt. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you take me?" "I'm broken." Jack frowned. "You're not broken," he said. "You're alive. That's all that matters." A long silence filled the room. She looked away, covering her face with her hands, and her shoulders shook as she cried quietly. Not loud sobs, just quiet, painful release. Jack didn't touch her, didn't interrupt, he just let her cry. Because maybe this was the first time anyone had let her do that in years. Finally, she looked up, wiping her face. "My name," she said softly, "is Raylin." Jack nodded. "I'm Jack." Raylin looked around again, eyes scanning the walls. "Is this your ship?" she asked. "Yeah," Jack replied. "It's not much, but it flies, and it's safe." She gave a weak smile, like she wasn't sure if she believed that. Then she leaned back on the pillow. Body still tense, but no longer panicked, she watched him with curious eyes, not fear, just confusion. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Why are you being kind?" Jack looked down at his hands. He didn't know how to explain it. "I went to that auction for scrap metal," he said. "My ship's broken, and I needed parts." He looked at her again, meeting her eyes. "But then I saw you, and I couldn't walk away." Raylan's lips trembled. "No one ever said that before," she whispered. "No one ever stayed." Jack stood up, walked to the small shelf in the corner, and brought back a packet of water and a protein bar. He placed them gently beside her. "Eat," he said. "You need strength." She looked at the food like it was treasure, then looked at him again. "Will you sell me later?" she asked softly. Or trade me? Her voice was hollow, like she already knew the answer. Jack's voice was firm now. No, he said. Never. For the first time, Raylan believed him. She took the water in shaky hands and drank slowly. Her eyes never left him. And as Jack watched her, he knew something had changed deep inside him. He came looking for junk to fix his ship. Instead, he found a life worth protecting. And somewhere in the silence of that tiny ship cabin, two broken souls began to feel something. Neither had felt in a long, long time hope. Raylan was sleeping again, curled up under a blanket too thin for real warmth. Jack sat beside her, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. He had removed most of the wires, but the metal plates in her back still glowed faintly in the dark. It wasn't just scars or Tekkit, it was something more. Something wrong, something deep. Jack had seen many strange things in the galaxy, but never a person treated like a machine, never someone fused with old tech. Wires where veins should be, and circuits buried in flesh. She wasn't just hurt, she had been changed. On purpose, the next morning, Raylan woke up with a gasp. Her body jolted like something shocked her from inside. Jack reached out, but stopped, remembering how she flinched at touch. I'm here, he said gently. You're safe. She held her head, breathing hard. There's something in me, she whispered. I feel it buzzing, moving under my skin. Jack nodded slowly. I think they put tech in you, Raylan. But it's not just for control, he paused. Then said the words he'd been afraid to say. I think they were turning you into a weapon. Her face went pale, her hands trembled. She looked down at her own body like it didn't belong to her anymore. I don't remember everything, she said quietly. But I remember pain and machines and voices that never called me by name. Jack activated his ship scanner again and ran it over her body. The screen lit up with signals, some familiar, most not. Tiny devices were buried in her spine. Around her heart, even in her neck, some were broken, but others still pulsed with faint power. Raylan stared at the screen, eyes wide. What am I? She asked. Jack didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward and tapped the screen. You're alive, he said. That's what matters. Raylan shook her head. No. I need to know, please. Tell me everything you see. So Jack. Did he explain what he found, how the tech wasn't meant to help her, but to control her? Some of it looked like neural dampeners, meant to block emotions or thoughts. Others were like shock nodes, used to punish with pain. But one core module near her spine was still active, and it worried him the most. It had a signal transmitter, meaning someone might still be tracking her. Raylan covered her mouth, trying not to scream. They never wanted me to escape. She said, voice shaking, they want me back. Jack stood up, walking across the room. He turned on the jamming field, a small device he usually used to hide from patrol scans. We're safe for now, he said. No one can trace you here. Not while that's on. Raylan looked up at him, her voice softer now. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Jack turned back and looked her in the eyes. Maybe I don't, he said, but I know you were treated like junk. And that's not something I can ignore. She sat quietly, hugging her knees. Then she said something. That made Jack pause. They called me Unit 9, she whispered, said I was a failure. She took a deep breath, then added, but my real name is Raylan Taryavasari. She looked up, her eyes suddenly sharper. I was born on a ship called the Star Empress. And I was supposed to be heir to a great line of diplomats. Jack blinked, stunned. You were royalty? He asked. She nodded slowly. Yes, but our ship was attacked. Years ago, maybe more. I was taken. Changed. Jack sat down again, his mind racing, if what she said was true. Then she wasn't just any alien girl. She was someone important, someone powerful, someone who had been silenced on purpose. He looked at her again, really looked, and saw not just the damage, but the strength still left in her. "You're not a failure," he said. "You survived." Raylan smiled weakly. "You're the first person who said that to me." They sat in silence for a while, the ship humming softly around them. Jack was no doctor, no rebel, and definitely no royal bodyguard. But he had made a choice the moment he carried her out. Of that auction, she wasn't scrap. She wasn't a machine. She was Raylan. And Jack was going to protect her even if it meant making enemies he couldn't see yet, outside the ship, in the darkness of space. A faint signal flickered, a pulse, from the device inside Raylan. It reached a distant receiver on a hidden satellite, and far away, in a cold metal chamber, a screen lit up with her location. Someone whispered through the static, "She's alive." Asterisk, the stars outside the ship blinked like distant fires inside. Jack and Raylan sat at the tiny table, eating in silence. It was her third day aboard the Rust Sparrow. Her body was healing slowly, but the bigger wounds were still inside memories. Questions, fear. She chewed her food slowly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to enjoy it. Jack watched her carefully, but without pressure. He was waiting, patiently, for her to speak first. Raylan finally looked up, her voice soft but steady. "Do you believe I'm really her? The girl I say I was?" Jack nodded. "I believe you," he said. "But if you want to tell me more, I'll listen." She took a breath and began. "I was born in orbit around the Varellan system," she said. "My family ruled peace talks between 7 different alien empires." She paused, hands shaking slightly. "My mother was the Empress of the Silver Accord. My father was a human ambassador." Jack blinked in surprise. "Your father was human?" Raylan nodded. "That's why I look different from other Virelon." She said, "I wasn't pureblood, and not everyone accepted me." Her voice grew bitter for a moment. "Some said I would ruin the bloodline. Others said I was a bridge." Between worlds, Jack stayed quiet, letting her talk. Her eyes drifted, lost in memory. "When I was 13 cycles old, our ship was attacked. We were heading to a peace conference." Her hands clenched tightly. They didn't want peace. They wanted warrant. My family was in the way. She paused again, her jaw tight. "They took me." She whispered, "They didn't kill me because I was valuable." Her voice trembled. "They ran experiments. Tried to use me as a weapon or a message, but I refused to obey." Jack felt a cold knot in his stomach. He had guessed pain, but not a childhood stolen by warlords and science labs. "And so," she continued, "they punished me, removed my name, replaced it with a number unit 9. She touched the back of her neck where a small scar still burned. They stripped away everything. Even my memories. For a while, I didn't know who I was." Jack leaned forward, his voice gentle. "But you remembered." She gave a small nod. "When you carried me out of that auction," she said, "something came back, my name, my past. Not all of it, but enough." Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. "And now, I don't know who I am." "You're Raylan," Jack said. Firm but kind. "You're not a machine, not a number, not anyone's weapon." She looked at him, truly looked. Then she smiled, small, hesitant, but real. "You talk like someone who's seen too much too," she said. Jack chuckled softly. "Maybe I have," he said, "but I've never seen anything like you." Just then, the console beeped. Jack walked over and checked the screen. The radar had picked up a ship, fast, silent, too far to scan clearly. He frowned. No one should be this deep in drift space. He muttered. He shut the console off, quickly hiding the screen from Raylan, but she had seen the look in his eyes. "What is it?" she asked, standing up slowly. Jack tried to smile. "Probably just a cargo ship passing by," he said. But Raylan's voice dropped low. "Serious?" "No, it's not. Jack turned around, confused. How do you know? Raylan closed her eyes and pointed to her back. The core unit, she said. It's warming again. I can feel it. Her eyes opened, full of fear. They found me, Jack cursed under his breath. The jamming field was still on, but somehow, her tracker was leaking a trace signal. They didn't have much time. We have to go, he said, rushing to the controls. Where? She asked, her voice tight. To a place no one tracks. Jack said, old mining colony, dead system. But it's got something better than hiding answers. He looked at her. You want to know who you are, Raylan? I think I know where to start. She stared at him, unsure. You're not scared? Jack gave her a crooked smile. I didn't come this far to run now, as the engines roared to life. Raylan stood beside him, her hand resting on the back of his chair. In that moment, she didn't look broken. She looked like a queen waking from a long nightmare. But far behind them, the dark ship followed, quiet and cold. Inside its command center, a voice spoke through static. Subject 9 has broken containment. A second voice replied. Then we retrieve her, or burn everything around her. The stars stretched into long lines as the Rust Sparrow jumped into hyperspace. Jack held the controls tight, eyes locked on the navigation screen. Raylan stood beside him, her hand pressed to the wall to stay steady. Behind them, the enemy. Ship had disappeared from the radar, but Jack knew it hadn't given up. No one who hunts in shadows ever stops at the first escape. They'll follow, Raylan said quietly. Jack nodded. I know, he replied, but we'll make it hard for them, as their destination was a dead mining colony orbiting a red dwarf. The place hadn't seen life in years. No patrols, no trade, just abandoned tunnels and long-forgotten machines. It was the perfect place to hide, or to prepare. When they landed, the air was thick with dust. The colony smelled of rust and silence. Jack led Raylan through narrow hallways filled with broken lights and flickering screens. Why here? She asked, looking around. Because no one comes here, Jack said. And because I know someone who might help us. They reached an old control room where a tall metal figure sat still in a corner. A rusty maintenance android, barely awake. Jack knelt beside it, tapped a few buttons on its chest, and whispered, "Come on, old friend," with a loud spark. The droid's eyes lit up, glowing blue designation. "Sprocket, online," it said in a broken voice. "Jack Grayson. Unauthorized. Visitor?" "Welcome back," Jack smiled. "I need access to the old data vaults," he said. "Everything on Project Unit 9. Raylan tensed at the name. Sprocket paused, then responded. "Access granted. Warning. Project data is classified and dangerous." "Good," Jack said. "That means we're on the right track." Hours passed as the droid connected to the broken systems. Sparks flew. Screens blinked, and old files came back to life. Raylan stood behind Jack, arms crossed. "Tightly. I'm scared," she whispered. Jack turned to her, his voice calm. "You're not alone." Then the first file appeared. It showed a lab, cold and bright, filled with machines and glass chambers. Inside one of them Relling, young and unconscious. The file read, Subject 9, Hybrid Royal. Target of conversion and obedience conditioning. The next image showed scientists adjusting the wires in her back, programming pain into her nerves. Jack's fists clenched. "They tortured you," he said. Voice low, Raylan looked away, eyes glassy with pain. "They wanted to erase who I was," she whispered. Piece by piece, she touched her chest, but something stayed. Something small. Like a flame that wouldn't go out. Suddenly, the screen blinked red. Sprocket stuttered. Alert. External signal detected. Ship inbound. Fast approach. Jack stood up, heart racing. They found us, outside the colony, the enemy. Ship descended like a silent bird of death. It landed without noise, without light. and from its doors stepped 5 figures tall, armored, faceless, hunters inside. Jack grabbed his blaster and tossed Raylin a shock stick. "Do you know how to use it?" he asked. She nodded, her grip firm. "I may have been their prisoner, but I remember how to fight." The first explosion shook the walls. Dust rained from the ceiling as the mercenaries entered the tunnels. Jack set up trap strip lasers, EMP grenades, collapsing doors. The enemy walked right through them, slow but unstoppable. "They're not just soldiers," Raylin said. "They're enhanced." Jack fired, hitting one in the chest, but the blast only knocked it back. "They're modified like you were," he said, "only fully controlled." They ran deeper into the colony, every step echoing with fear and purpose. Raylin turned and fought her shock stick, crackling with energy. She hit one attacker in the neck, and the creature screamed and fell. The others paused for a moment, confused. They didn't expect you to fight back, Jack said with a grin. Raylin looked at him, her eyes burning now. "I'm not their tool anymore," she said, "and I won't go back." The last stand happened in the control room. Jack blocked the entrance with heavy crates, while Raylin accessed the system one last time. "I can send a virus," she said. "Something that'll fry their neural links." "Do it," Jack said. "I'll buy you time." He stood at the door, firing again and again as the mercenaries pushed through behind him. Raylin screamed as her fingers flew across the controls. The virus uploaded, a pulse shot through the air, high-pitched and electric. The enemy froze, spasmed, and collapsed. Their suits went dark, their weapons fell. Silence followed, heavy and still. Jack turned, breathing hard. Raylin was on the floor, pale and shaking. He rushed to her side. "I'm okay," she whispered. "Just tired." He helped her sit up, holding her close. "You did it," he said. "You stopped them." Raylin looked around the ruined room. Then at him, for the first time, she said, "I chose to fight for myself." Jack smiled. "You're more than they ever knew." Outside, the red dwarf shone faintly through the dust, and in the shadows of a dead world. Raylin had finally taken her first real breath of freedom. Days passed since the fight. The dead colony was quiet again, but it no longer felt cold. Jack had repaired the broken walls, cleared the halls, and set up power in one small section. Of the old station, it wasn't much, just a few working lights, a heater, and a working shower, but for Raylin, it was the first real shelter she had known in years. She stood by the dusty window, watching the distant stars through cracked glass. Jack entered the room, holding 2 cups of warm liquid, still watching the sky. He asked with a gentle smile. She turned and nodded, taking the cup from his hand. "I used to dream of flying free," she said. "Now I just want to stay still for a while." They sat together on a metal bench, wrapped in silence. Not the silence of fear, but of peace. Raylin leaned her head on his shoulder. "You fixed this place," she whispered. Jack chuckled softly. "Needed something to do," he said. "Besides, it's easier fixing metal than fixing people." She looked up at him, her eyes soft. "You helped fix me too," she said. Jack shook his head. "You did that yourself." The station's light flickered overhead, a reminder that this place was falling apart, but somehow it felt more like home than anywhere either of them had ever known. Jack had cleared a small room for Raylin, filled it with blankets, old books, and warm light. He didn't tell her what to do, didn't push, didn't treat her like something fragile. He just gave her space to breathe, and she did, each day. Raylin grew stronger. Her steps were firmer, her hands steadier, her eyes no longer filled with fear. She laughed, now quiet at first, but real. She even found an old music chip in the storage room and played soft melodies as she worked on repairing the control boards. One night, while sitting by the heater, Raylin asked the question she had kept inside for days. "Do you think This could be our home. Jack looked at her with surprise, then nodded slowly. I think home is wherever you stop running, he said, and we're not running anymore. She smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes. I like it. Here, she said, even if the walls creak and the lights flicker. Jack raised an eyebrow. Well, I was going to fix the lights tomorrow, he said. She laughed again, and he joined her. It was a simple moment, but to them, it was golden. Later that week, they planted seeds. Jack had a small hydropod tucked away in storage. Together, they filled it with soil and recycled water. Placing seeds one by one, Raylan pressed her fingers into the dirt and smiled. I never thought I'd care about something this small, she said. Jack nodded. It's not small. He said, it's life. As the plants began to grow, so did something between them quiet. Unspoken, but warm. Jack never said the words out loud, and neither did she. But it was in the way he handed her tools before she asked, in the way she saved the last bite of food for him every time, in the way their hands brushed just a little longer each time they passed each other in the narrow hallway. One night, Raylan came to him, holding an old jacket she had repaired. It was torn, she said shyly. I fixed it. Jack took the jacket and stared at the perfect stitches. You didn't have to, he said. I wanted to, she replied. Looking into his eyes, for a long moment, they stood there in silence. Then Jack whispered, Thank you. She took a step closer. Do you think we'll always have to look over our shoulders? Jack shook his head slowly. I don't know, he said. But I'll always stand in front of you. Raylan blinked back tears and leaned her head against his chest. His arms wrapped around her without hesitation. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a weapon or a prisoner or a project. She just felt human. Outside, the dead planet spun slowly in silence, but inside the old mining colony, something rare had bloomed: trust, peace, and maybe even love. The past had broken them, but here, in this forgotten place, they were starting something new, something fragile, something real. Raylan looked up at Jack and whispered, Thank you for not giving up on me. Jack smiled, his voice soft. You were never something to give up on. The stars above the old mining colony were quiet tonight. Raylan stood alone on the landing deck, her eyes fixed on a small blinking light in the sky. It was a beacon, a signal from survivors of her lost people. They had found her. They had been searching ever since the attack on her family's ship, and now they were coming. Jack stood behind her, arms crossed, silent. He didn't want to say goodbye. But he didn't want to stop her either. She was royalty. She had a destiny far beyond this dusty old station. But still, she hadn't made her choice. I didn't expect them to find me, Raylan whispered. Jack nodded. Do you want to go? He asked, his voice calm. She turned to look at him, her eyes filled with emotion. I don't know, she said. I thought I'd feel joy, but now I feel afraid. Afraid of what? Jack asked softly. Afraid of losing what we have here, she replied. Afraid they'll expect me to be someone I'm not anymore. He stepped closer. You don't owe anyone anything, he said. You've already fought to be free. Raylan looked down at her hands, the same hands that once wore chains. Now, free and calloused from work, I thought I was broken, she said quietly. Just a tool, something to be used. She looked up at him. But you never saw me like that. Jack didn't answer with words. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something small and wrapped in cloth. He handed it to her slowly. She unwrapped it and gasped. It was a tiny, hand-carved star made of metal and glass. She held it carefully, turning it in her fingers. I made it the first night you slept without fear, Jack said. I thought maybe one day you'd take it with you. Tears filled Raylan's eyes. I don't want to leave this behind, she whispered. Jack smiled sadly. Then don't, he said. Take it with you. A distant rumble filled the air as a royal shuttle entered the atmosphere. Its sleek shape cut through the sky like a blade. Raylan watched it approach, heart pounding. She was being called back to her bloodline, her throne, her legacy. But as the shuttle landed and the doors opened, she didn't move. Figures in royal robes stepped out tall, graceful, and stunned to see her alive. They bowed deeply, calling her name, Princess Raylan Visari. You've returned. She looked at them, then looked at Jack, and in that moment, the war inside her ended. She stepped forward, but not to greet the nobles. She walked back to Jack, took his hand, and turned to face the group. I'm not returning. Alone, she said, her voice strong. This man saved me when I was nothing. One of the elders frowned. He is human. Unmarked, untrained, unworthy of a royal side. Raylan's eyes narrowed. I was treated like trash. She said, her voice sharp, and he gave me a blanket before he ever asked my name. Another voice said, but he is not of royal blood. Raylan held up the tiny carved star. No. But he gave me something more than blood, she said. He gave me choice, warmth, and dignity. Jack looked stunned. He never asked for this, never expected to be seen like this. But Raylan stood firm, her hand still in his. I will return to my people, she said. But I will not return alone, and I will not return. As the girl they tried to turn into a machine, her voice rose like a wave. I return as the woman he helped me become. The nobles were silent, unsure, but slowly. One of them bowed, then another, until all of them lowered their heads in respect, not just to her, but to the bond they had no power to break. Later, as the shuttle prepared for takeoff, Raylan turned to Jack. You don't have to come, she said, but I want you to. Jack looked at the mining colony, the cracked walls, the silent halls. Then he looked at her straw, beautiful, no longer just surviving, but leading. He nodded. I go where you go, he said simply, as they boarded the shuttle, hand in hand. Raylan looked once more at the world that gave her a second chance, the place where she found her voice, her strength. And a human who never saw her as scrap, only as someone worth saving. The doors closed. The engines roared, and together they left behind a broken past to build something new. Not as princess and servant, not as project and rescuer, but as two souls who had survived the fire and walked out side by side,